Nu hälsar vi det första bolaget för det här eventet välkommen och det är Cyxone VD Tara Heitner. Welcome Tara.
Thank you very much. It's really wonderful to be here and also to have a live audience. It's much nicer to present when there are people in the audience. So, my name is Tara Heitner. I'm CEO of Saxon. Now, Saxon is a company just around the corner, and we're developing breakthrough therapies for diseases of the immune system. And right now we're focused on autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis, or RA, and multiple sclerosis, or MS. And we also recently finalized a trial in COVID-19, which I'll touch upon. But there are some similarities with the mode of action for Rebexmod, which is why we started that trial during the pandemic. Now, these diseases, autoimmune diseases, are diseases that are chronic. They affect people for decades, where patients who suffer from these diseases have debilitating pain that can cause deformities and disabilities. And yet, the patients look sometimes perfectly healthy on the outside, so it's quite difficult for patients to manage. They affect predominantly women, these autoimmune diseases. With rheumatoid arthritis, it's 5-to-1 women to men. For multiple sclerosis, it's 3-to-1. And it's a disease where there's currently therapies that can manage the disease, but they come with a lot of side effects and low tolerability. So despite the fact that there are therapies, we believe there's still room for improvement, and that's what Saxon is focused on. These are diseases with large markets, large unmet needs, and a great commercial opportunity for us as a company and for our investors. Right now, we have a pipeline of 3 programs, where 2 of them are in the clinical stage. And as I mentioned, we've just completed a trial with COVID-19. We're waiting for the top-line results. Now, what's important to note is that rheumatoid arthritis is a chronic disease. As I mentioned, it lasts for decades, whereas COVID-19 is an acute disorder, which is an infection. So the COVID-19 is an opportunity for us to evaluate whether our drug is relevant in an acute setting. But this has really little relevance for the RA setting, because we already know from our previous trial that Rebexmod shows improvements in RA, so we know it works. We also have a preclinical program in multiple sclerosis, called, a peptide compound called T20K, which I'll touch upon. But this is a very innovative and exciting program, which I'll describe a little bit more later. Now, in order to deliver on all of our programs, we have put together a very small but strong team. Myself, I'm a Canadian by birth, and I'm trained as a scientist, but I've been building companies since around 2001. And we've recently hired a new Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Cornell Patter, who comes with decades of experience in running RA trials within big pharma companies, as well as biotechs, but also trials in other indications. Carl Magnus Hogerkup is a PhD with a degree in immunology and has lots of experience in autoimmune disease from his years at Novo Nordisk, as well as other biotechs. And we also recently brought on a new CFO, Henrik Hang, who has experience with publicly traded companies and all the governance and compliance that is required to assist us with the uplisting process, which we hope to accomplish in 2022. So we feel like we have a good foundation moving forward. So the question is now, why do we need new drugs for rheumatoid arthritis? Right now, the patients who are diagnosed are offered first-line treatment, methotrexate. Methotrexate is a very inexpensive drug. However, it comes with drawbacks. Many patients don't respond to methotrexate, and those who do respond, there's a large number, over 40%, who have intolerabilities. They have gastrointestinal pain, or they have what we call a methotrexate hangover, which causes lethargy for like about 3 days after you take your drug. So this is often combined with steroids in order to get better efficacy. And steroids are also have come with some serious side effects. So we are looking to come into the early stage first-line treatment market. When methotrexate fails, patients are often, the treatment is escalated to biologicals. You may have heard of TNF-alpha inhibitors and IL-6 inhibitors. And these are antibody drugs which kind of neutralize the IL-6 cytokine and the TNF cytokine after it's been expressed. But these drugs are injectables, and they have made a huge impact for patients. Before these came out on the market 10 years ago, there was really very little you could do for rheumatoid arthritis. So they have made a big impact. But again, only 30% of patients respond to biologicals, and the rest have low response or intolerabilities. So what patients are faced with when they're diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis is decades of constant treatment switches, visits to the doctor, in a race to try to keep the disease in remission and to stay without pain. And we want to change this. JAK inhibitors have been a drug which has also made a big impact for rheumatoid arthritis patients. And we're going to be, the first oral drug to be used to treat rheumatoid arthritis. But recently they got some serious safety warnings, which means they'll probably be used as third-line treatments when everything else fails. Now, Rebexamod is an orally available drug, one you can take as a pill, drug candidate that we're developing as a first-line treatment. It has a novel mode of action. There's no other drug on the market that has this mode of action, and there's no other drug in development that has this mode of action. It works by inhibiting the development of a key cell type called the macrophage, which is responsible for the joint damage in RA, the damage to the cartilage and the bone. What Rebexamod does is it goes inside the cell, and it targets a key pathway that causes the release of multiple cytokines, including IL-6 and TNF-alpha, but also many other cytokines that are responsible for this joint damage. So it doesn't just mop them up, it turns off the tap. And therefore, it has the benefit of protecting the joint by preventing the development of these cells and the release of these cytokines. This is some data which I showed to support what I've just said, showing how Rebexamod at 2 different doses in vitro, it prevents the expression of multiple cytokines and chemokines that are responsible for RA. And this broad efficacy can perhaps mean that Rebexamod will be effective for a broader range of patients. So our vision for Rebexamod is this will be a first-line treatment which can be used or prescribed as an alternative to methotrexate for those patients who don't respond to methotrexate and those patients who don't tolerate it. And it could be used for a long time before delaying or even preventing the need for treatment escalation. Now, why do we believe this we can do this? And I mentioned earlier that we have already some evidence that this is working in RA patients. This is data from a phase 2A trial, which shows that although we didn't meet the endpoint at 12 weeks, we show improvements for patients who are on methotrexate. So the placebo is the light blue, is patients on methotrexate, and we show improvements at 12 weeks. And then at the 16-week follow-up, you see durability of this effect, and you see statistically significant efficacy. This is very important because in this trial, we actually had a very broad range of patients included, and the patients were on a methotrexate background. Based on this data, we think we can optimize the phase 2B trial going forward. We'll take the endpoint at 16 weeks, narrow the patient population to only those patients that are methotrexate inadequate responders. And we expect that we'll be able to see a very strong statistical significance as a result of our treatment. Now, as I mentioned, we're going for this market of methotrexate non-responders, and just so you know, this is quite a big market. RA itself is a very large market, as you know, but the subset of patients we are targeting with this trial corresponds to about 500,000 patients in Europe and the United States. So this corresponds to about 40% of patients who don't respond to methotrexate. This could lead to a peak market of approximately $1 billion annually if we assume the same pricing for our drug as for JAK inhibitors. So this is a very big commercial opportunity, and just to put it in perspective, our focus at Saxon is rheumatoid arthritis right now. This is where the main value driver is for the company and for our investors. COVID-19 is also a good opportunity, but it is commercially less significant than RA. We think it's important to develop drugs for COVID because of the pandemic, however, and if our drug can be useful, we definitely will see it applied across indications. So what we're expecting for the RA trial is that we're right now heavily occupied with startup activities. We're engaging with a world-class global CRO with expertise in RA, and starting to look at sites where the trials can be held all across the world. We will likely start including patients, enrolling patients in Q1. And we would have a readout for this trial in around 2023. This drug could potentially be on the market in 2025. But our goal as a company is to partner this any time between now and the phase 2b readout. And we're already in discussions with many, many companies, pharmaceutical companies that are interested in partnering with us. There's a lot of market interest because of the novel mode of action, the oral bioavailability, and the safety profile. Rubeximod has been shown so far to have a very good safety and tolerability profile. Now I'll just quickly give you an overview of the COVID-19, and you think everyone in the room must be aware of the status in the world. Right now, while in some regions you have the pandemic under control due to vaccines, and congratulations to anyone who has taken the vaccine, because as we can see, the most of the people ending up in hospital in ICU, 90% have not been vaccinated. However, there are regions where people cannot get access to vaccines and many people who can't take vaccines, so we need to develop therapies. There's also a large number of people who just still refuse to get vaccinated. There is a lot of support from the FDA and from the EMA to develop these therapies, and we're in contact with both the FDA and the EMA. And we will move forward with this program pending, positive readout from our trial, and pending support from the FDA or the EMA or involvement of a partner, because we really want to have a market pull for this. For multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease that can be very debilitating. It's a disease where the immune system, which is meant to protect you from disease, infection and cancer, instead it attacks the myelin sheath on the surface of cells, of nerve cells. When this happens, you end up getting cytokines released by these T cells, which attack the myelin sheath, and these recruit even more immune cells to the nerve to attack it even further. This results in destruction of the myelin sheath, called demyelination. And when this happens, you get incorrect signaling across your nerves. And this can result in multiple symptoms such as loss of eyesight, loss of balance, tingling in your extremities, and cognitive disorders. It affects people in the prime of their life when they're about to have families, go to school, start careers, and it can prevent people from doing these things, from working, and eventually, if untreated, multiple sclerosis patients end up in a wheelchair, unable to walk and move and take care of themselves. There are millions of patients worldwide, but there's a large number of multiple sclerosis patients in northern countries, especially in Scandinavia. And current therapies, as I mentioned, they can control the disease for some patients, but many patients are left without options. So we want to change that. T20K is a drug with another drug, which is a potential first-in-class drug with a novel mode of action. It has been shown in the laboratory to reduce the IL-2 release from these cells, and that's a cytokine which is important in multiple sclerosis. Here we can show that it inhibits the IL-2 release and IL-2 receptor expression. And the result is that we can show in animal models of MS that we can actually prevent the disease from developing. In this is just a sample of some of the data we have, but on the left-hand side, you can see that this is a preventative model where T20K is administered and you can prevent the disease from developing when administered at the beginning. But in the second panel, you see that the animals are allowed to develop the disease, and at day 12, the drug is first administered. And so even in this setting, we can treat the disease and prevent it from developing further. So we're working on this now. We're doing a lot of preclinical work. We should have some exciting news before the end of the year. And we want to make some key decisions on moving forward. We're deciding on an administration form, whether it's going to be oral or whether it's going to be a sub-Q sort of injection. And we will also decide on manufacturing. This is also a very substantial market. It's estimated to grow to $33 billion in 2029. And if we can demonstrate this is effective in a subset of MS patients, then we believe we can offer something new to the market and which can actually make a meaningful impact for patients. And we will be able to also deliver this value to our investors. So to conclude, I'll give you a little bit of what you might see in the future. These are, Rebexmod and T20K are drugs which target central mechanisms that are relevant across autoimmune diseases. And so our vision is to expand into other indications beyond RA and beyond MS to get the full value of these indications, of these drugs. And what we can see is that when you go to a multi-indication deal, you end up with much greater value coming to the company and to the investor. So you can see a step up from to about over $1 billion potential dollars in deal value after a phase 2b readout for a multi-indication asset. So to conclude, Saxon is an emerging biotech company that's growing the headcount, the team, and the pipeline. And right now we're focused on starting a very important trial in rheumatoid arthritis, as well as continuing our preclinical activities for a novel treatment for multiple sclerosis. We're awaiting the final readout for the COVID trial, and pending that result, we will make decisions on how to move forward. These are all very large and important markets with unmet needs, and we hope to deliver breakthrough therapies that can make a meaningful impact for patients and deliver a lot of value to our investors and shareholders. So with that, I take any questions, and my email address is there. If you have any questions that pop up later, you're welcome to email me, and you can also sign up for to be on our mailing list if you want to hear about the exciting news that will be coming up.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Thank you. Round of applause. And feel free to ask questions. If you have any questions that pops up in your head, just raise your hands. And for you who is watching, you can type your questions in the live chat. Okay. What makes your research unique, you would say, to sum it up?
Well, we work with very closely with the scientists who actually develop the drugs. For example, one of our scientific advisors is Richard Hamdahl, and he was one of the scientists from Karolinska Institute that first worked on Rebexmod and developed it. And he is a strong believer in the relevance of Rebexmod in RA. We've also initiated new academic collaborations with Professor Constantino Pitsalis, who is a world-class researcher in RA, and he's also a strong believer in the role and the meaningful role that Rebexmod could play for RA patients. So this drives us as a company to develop these for our patients.
Okay. And are you planning to start more or different studies ahead?
Yeah, we're focused right now on getting the RA trial started. Once it's up and running and pending decisions from our board, we will open up to some preclinical studies and other indications. We already know that, for example, Rebexamod in preclinical studies is shows efficacy in other autoimmune diseases as well as other neuroinflammatory disorders. So we want to explore that further, and if we can confirm it, start clinical trials in other indications.
Great. And how can you finance your projects?
Well, we're looking for partnerships. We have shareholders that are, invest in our company, retail investors. And we also will seek non-dilutive funding through grants, for example, for the COVID trial, should that produce positive results. So there's many different ways that we will look for financing in the future.
Okay. Any questions from the audience? Not right now. Are there other competitors that works in the same field as you?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the RA pipeline, main competitors are the biologics, which many of these are becoming generics. When they become generics, then of course the price goes down, and then it becomes a much more competitive field. So we're really aiming for the fact that Rebexamod is an oral drug, whereas the biologics are injectable, so it's quite differentiated. And Rebexamod has a unique mode of action. So those patients who perhaps don't respond to biologicals, which is 70%, maybe would be relevant for our drug, which has a completely different mode of action.
Okay. And how do you generate shareholder value?
There will be, of course, once you get a readout from the phase 2b trial and a partnership, for example, there will be a great deal of value generated for our shareholders through the partnership deal. And our business model is also to make partnership deals for the MS program as well, so that we will generate shareholder value by making partnerships. As we show that the drug candidates are effective in other indications, that step up into multi-indication deals, and the value of the deals we can make will also increase, and that will also translate into shareholder value.
Now I have some questions from the live chat. The first question is, what are the biggest risks in the company Saxon?
Well, for all biotech companies, the biggest risk is not lack of funding. So if you can't actually, fund, clinical development is expensive. If you want to do it well, we are a company that runs everything at the highest level of quality. We follow all the regulatory provisions and ethical guidelines, and that it requires that we work with the best CROs and partners. So we want to make sure we can fund this through adequately.
And one last question. Where will the company be in 5 years?
Well, if it's up to me and with my vision, we will be a company where we'll have perhaps twice as many employees, 20 to maybe 25 employees. We'll be having multiple, we will have a drug in phase 3 or on the market. We will have at least one partnership deal, and we'll be having a much longer, bigger pipeline with hopefully other indications beyond rheumatoid arthritis and MS. But potentially also, if we make a partnership deal, we will also in-license new assets that fit within our brand of delivering, breakthrough therapies for patients.
Thank you very much, Tara. And thank you very much, Cyxone.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.